Hello everyone and a very good evening. Welcome to your second class for paper 8 Indirect Tax Laws for the CA final course. I am CA Shashank Gupta. Friends, in the last class we had discussed chapter 1 majorly about introduction of GST in India, basics of GST, fundamentals of GST, what were the issues which were existing prior to GST, what are the benefits that have been derived with the implementation of GST, levies under GST, the constitutional provisions, important provisions under the Constitution relating to GST. Thereafter, we had discussed supply, definition of supply, essentials for a transaction to constitute as supply, exceptions to those essential ingredients such as without consideration, not in the course of furtherance of business. Then specific classification of a supply, whether it is a supply of goods or services under Schedule 2. Then what transactions would be treated neither as supply of goods nor supply of services under Schedule 3. And we had also discussed the concept of composite supply and mixed supply. Under the head composite supply, we had studied that when two or more supplies are supplied in conjunction, one of which is a principal supply, and these supplies are naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business, then such a transaction will be treated as composite supply. If a transaction is a composite supply, then it will be liable to tax under GST as in accordance with the principal supply. However, if two or more supplies are made in conjunction, but they are not naturally bundled, that is, it is not the case of a composite supply, then such a transaction would be treated as mixed supply. And if a transaction were to be treated as mixed supply, it would be liable to tax at the rate and in accordance with the supply which attracts the highest rate of tax. For the sake of simplicity, we had discussed one example, and the example pertained to supply of mobile phone and a Rolls-Royce car along with the mobile phone. I'm talking about mixed supply cases. This was our broad discussion. There were certain queries from all of you. We had discussed those queries. Thereafter, I had requested all of you to kindly go back and study both these chapters. Those of you who would have gone back and actually studied would have found that there are certain specific kinds of transactions which are mentioned in chapter 2, that is, either government has issued a circular or a clarification or some recent amendments. Those are also a part of chapter 2, and today, dear friends, we are going to discuss all those practical queries. We'll cover some practical queries, practical questions. Moreover, we will also cover the amendments as relevant for your November 2020 exams pertaining to Chapter 2. And we would also discuss those specific clarifications or circulars or transactions which are specifically covered in your study material. So we are continuing our discussion relating to supply. The first specific transaction is taxability of cost petroleum. Now, before we go on to discuss about cost petroleum, let us first take a step back and understand that how does usually a petroleum contract or a petroleum set of transaction work. So friends, petroleum at its very basic is a natural resource. Natural resource meaning that it cannot be artificially created. It is created by nature only. And when created by nature, it is a part of the sovereign function of the country, that is, all the natural resources which are present in our country, the ownership, the right to ownership to that lies with the government of India and no one else. Now, government itself is not into the extraction exploration business. Of course, there are some government entities, PSU entities like Indian Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum, and there are private players like Reliance, Shell. So, what the government does is, government keeps on conducting studies that where they can find such natural resources so that the same can be extracted and used in the country. If you watch news, you can recall some episodes which were heavily in news pertaining to these kinds of transactions like KG Basin. Then there were some other gas reserves which were found, which the rights for which were given to Reliance. So here, what the government does is, they identify a possibility that, okay, this is an area and our study says that there could be natural reserves here, such as oil or petroleum. And then bids are invited, people are invited to bid for that. Whoever bids the highest gets the license to conduct exploration, and whatever reserves are found, that entity is entitled to sell those reserves or use those reserves first to extract their costs being license fee, costs being exploration, drilling and everything cost, and finally storage cost, marketing cost, everything. So first they have the right to cover their costs, and thereafter whatever amount is left surplus, that is usually shared between the government and the person, the entity who has received the license to extract these resources. So, one is giving the license for extraction. There is a certain fee against that license. We are not talking about that. The question here was whether the revenue which is earned by such petroleum company, which is first attributed towards their cost, will such attribution be liable to GST? First, let me tell you, as we had discussed in our last class, at present, petroleum products are outside GST. They are being levied to excise duty, VAT, central sales tax, as was prior to GST. Okay. So the question was, can this cost extraction be made liable to GST? The answer was no. Why no? Because it is something the oil companies are doing for themselves. Nothing is going to the government, and government has given nothing to them. Government gave them the license to extract. They paid the license fee. That's a separate chapter. But once the license is given and the company is working on that license, they are recovering their costs, then that is an activity they are doing for themselves, and hence no supply of service, not liable to GST. Secondly, once the costs are recovered, thereafter certain profit is earned. That profit is attributed between the government and the company. So the company earns profit, gives a certain agreed percentage to the government, and retains the rest of the profit with them. Now another question was whether this repatriation of profit to the government, will that be also liable to GST? So here there is a specific exemption which says government's revenue shall be exempt from GST. Clear till here? Let's move on to the next point of discussion. And friends, regarding your queries, so one thing that I've thought of is that we'll take your queries at a certain interval. Like we will take your queries, say after 1 hour of the class, then after another 1 hour of the class, so that the flow doesn't break. And in the meantime, you can all keep populating your queries. And thereafter, after 1 hour, we'll say dedicate 10 minutes for your queries. Then after another hour, we'll dedicate 10 minutes. And lastly, towards the end of the class. Next is principal and agent relationship. And here I recall yesterday one of our friend had asked query, one student had asked query regarding Deltradiology Agent. So so the context must be from a clarification which is detailed in the chapter 2. So we are going to discuss this in detail today. So principal and agent relationship. What kind of transactions can take place between a principal and an agent? देखिए, if a transaction is taking place between any principal and any agent, wherein goods are being supplied and the supply of goods is taking place along with a consideration. If that is the case, that there is a supply of goods plus there is a consideration attached to it, then by default this supply will become liable to GST, and there is no need to discuss principal-agent relationship any further. So suppose I am a chartered accountant, say suppose I am a businessman, and I am a principal and I have appointed 10 different kinds of agent. One is Deltradiology Agent, one is C&F agent, one is commission agent, one is pure agent, one is something else. Now to all these people, I am supplying goods, I am raising my invoice, my agent is the buyer, I am charging the money. Will I be liable to deposit GST or not, or should I see, okay, this is Deltradiology, so yes, this is C&F, so no. No need. Because if there is consideration attached to it, then agent or no agent, it is simply a normal case of supply which will be liable to tax under GST, subject to the fact that the supply of goods is not exempted or non-taxable. That's a separate aspect, okay? So one interesting thing that let me tell you, under law or under tax, there is no absolute sentence. So, like I just mentioned, that any supply to agent where there is a consideration, supplies for goods, it will be liable to tax. Now, some of you may say, sir, what if I am supplying wheat grains? That is exempt. How can you say it is taxable? So, my dear friends, please remember there is no absolute sentence. Of course, you have to apply your rational analysis to every statement, okay? So when do we need to see what is the nature of relationship between a principal and agent? When should I be worried? Okay, now I need to see what is the nature of relationship between this particular principal and his agent. When a supply is taking place between a principal and an agent without consideration, without consideration, without consideration. Because if a supply of goods is taking place between a principal and an agent, and the supply is without consideration, in such cases, if the agent is one who receives or supplies goods on behalf of the principal, then such supply will become liable to tax, even though there would be no consideration for the supply between a principal and his agent. I'll repeat myself that only in those cases where the principal is supplying goods to his agent without consideration, and the agent undertakes, or the agent is receiving or supplying goods on behalf of his principal, in such cases the transaction will be liable to tax under GST, irrespective of the fact that there was. So what is this receives or supplies on behalf of his principal? How would we know? So simply, if we are to understand, how do we determine is if the agent is, if the person who is buying goods from the agent doesn't know that actually the goods are being supplied by the principal, the agent is only raising his own invoice. So suppose I appoint an agent in Delhi. I am supplying remotes, AC remotes. Now this agent is a simple, he doesn't buy goods from me. I simply supply my stock to him, and he further supplies these goods to his customers. Even though the goods are actually being sold by me, but the agent raises his own invoice. That is, suppose I am Mr. X, my agent is Mr. Y, and the buyer is Mr. Z. Then Mr. Z only knows that Mr. Y is the one who sold the goods to him. He does not know about Mr. X. One exception is C&F agent. C&F agent by default is covered under this Schedule 1, even if the C&F agent mentions the name of the principal. So let me go by some illustrations to help you understand better. And these all illustrations are flowing from your study material. I have taken specifically those up so as to help you understand. So Mr. Anmol appoints Mr. Bholu to procure certain goods from the market. जाओ मेरे लिए सामान कुछ खरीद के ले आओ. Bholu identifies various suppliers who can provide the goods as desired by Anmol and asks the supplier to send the goods and issue the invoice directly to Anmol. So here can you see the transaction is taking place directly between the supplier and the recipient. Okay, the agent, he has only shared the coordinates that this person requires the goods, this person can sell the goods, let them both come together. He is not coming in between. He is maybe at best simply be concerned with his commission. That you wanted goods, I got you the goods, simply give me the commission. Like happens in case you purchase a house property, so generally you approach a dealer connects you with the seller, property seller, you buy the property and you pay the commission to the broker, right? So that is the case. So this case, particular case, is not covered under Schedule 1. Another illustration. Messrs. Tintin, a banking company, appoints an auctioneer to auction certain goods. The auctioneer arranges for the auction and identifies the potential bidders. The highest bid is accepted and the goods are sold to the highest bidder by Messrs. Tintin. The invoice for the supply of the goods is issued by Messrs. Tintin to the successful bidder. So, what is the role of the auctioneer? The auctioneer's role is limited to providing auctioning services for which he may charge some remuneration. Otherwise, the sale and purchase transaction, so the sale is happening from Messrs. Tintin, and the same is being bought by the buyer. The auctioneer is nowhere playing any other distortion in the transaction. So again, this will not be covered under Schedule 1. So it says, in this scenario, the auctioneer is merely providing the auctioneering services with no role played in the supply of the goods. Even in this scenario, Mandar is not an agent of Messrs. Tintin for the supply of goods in terms of para 3 of Schedule 1. So both of these transactions where we appoint an auctioneer, it could be a case of agent, but not covered under Schedule 1 because he is not distorting the transaction, he is not stepping in middle and showing himself as the seller. In the earlier example also, there was an agent appointed to identify some supply of goods. He did that, but he is not showcasing himself as the supplier or the recipient of goods. Another example. Gautam, an artist, appoints Gambhir to auction his painting. Gambhir arranges for the auction and identifies the potential bidders. The highest bid is accepted and the painting is sold to the highest bidder. The invoice for the, now this is important, okay? The invoice for the supply of the painting is issued by Gambhir. Who's Gambhir? The auctioneer, not the artist, but the auctioneer, on behalf of Gautam, but in his own name, and the painting is delivered to the successful bidder. In this scenario, Gambhir is not merely providing auctioneering services, but is also supplying the painting on behalf of Gautam to the bidder and have painting on behalf of Gautam. So here can you see, we had discussed an auctioneering scenario just before this case study, and now again, in the earlier case, the auctioneer was simply saying, I will auction, but you raise the invoice straight away. Okay? But here what is happening? The auctioneer is raising the invoice himself. And hence, this becomes a case where the agent is undertaking supply or receipt of goods on behalf of the principal. So goods are actually being sold by the artist, but Gambhir is stepping in and saying, okay, I am the one who's selling, but he is actually selling on behalf of Gautam. So here is the case where it will be covered under Schedule 1. So the supply of goods between Gautam and Gambhir will be liable to GST, and thereafter supply of goods by Gambhir to the successful bidder would also be liable to GST. Another example, a C&F agent or commission agent takes possession of the goods from the principal and issues the invoice in his own name. In such cases, the C&F commission agent is an agent of the principal for the supply of goods in terms of para 3 of schedule 1. So what is the identifying factor? Issues the invoice in his own name. कि भाई आप तो ये दिखा रहे हो सामने, you're showcasing this that you are the seller, but actually you are selling these goods on behalf of some other principal. Here, this line is important. The disclosure or non-disclosure of the name of the principal is immaterial in such situations. So basically, this is that kind of principal-agent relationship wherein actually the ownership of the goods lies with the principal, but the agent is showcasing as if he's the person who is supplying goods, and the name of the principal may or may not be mentioned, doesn't matter, but there the agent is stepping up from his role of his agent and showcasing himself as the supplier. And in effect, let me tell you another side of it. Is there any harm in this kind of transaction? That is where the agent is supplying goods and he is being made liable in accordance with Schedule 1 to be liable to pay GST. Is this any loss for the agent or is this a benefit? Let us think through. Goods are owned by the principal, suppose X Limited. X Limited has 10 lakh rupees worth of stock on which they have paid 2 lakh rupees as GST, let us presume. Okay. Now the agent says, I have a buyer, I can sell your goods, but I will sell goods in such a manner that I will showcase myself as the seller and I will pay you your 10 lakh rupees plus GST, but I will sell the goods at suppose 20 lakh rupees and pocket the 10 lakh rupees margin. Now suppose this situation was not there, this Schedule 1 condition was not there. Then what would happen? The principal who owns the stock of 10 lakh rupees plus GST, the GST would have remained with him. The ITC is lying in his books. Whereas the actual sale would have been undertaken by the agent, that is at 20 lakh rupees. And the agent would pay tax on 20 lakh rupees. Suppose 4 lakh rupees. And out of this 20 lakh, the agent would pay 10 lakh rupees to the principal and pocket the rest of the amount. But what happens to the input tax credit which is lying there in the books of accounts of the principal? That would have remained unutilized. And that is why there are cases of stock transfer, supply between distinct person is covered under Schedule 1, that the ITC balance keeps moving along with the goods. That is why principal-agent relationship, where the agent is undertaking supply on behalf of the principal, that has also been covered under Schedule 1. So if you think through the concept, if you think through what is the basic genesis behind such conditions, you can actually retain this longer, understand it better, and the entire concept becomes more friendly. Otherwise, simply आप बोलोगे principal agent, कुछ तो agent covered है, कुछ agent covered नहीं है, कुछ समझ में आ रहा नहीं है. What should we do? So, nothing to worry. Just remember these simple concepts behind it, and I hope you should be able to carry it forward to your exams and even thereafter. So this, friends, we have covered principal and agent relationship along with examples in detail, along with conceptual understanding, as some of our friends were demanding yesterday in the queries that Please use more examples, practical based study. So, this is not because you asked yesterday, it was always going to happen. Just the point that if we are a bit patient and we continue through the course, I think it is structured in a manner which will help you the most and with maximum coverage of your course. Now, one friend was asking yesterday, a student, so what is Deltradiology Agent? What is the relevance of Deltradiology Agent? What is special about Deltradiology Agent under GST? And I had briefly mentioned about Deltradiology Agent that the difference between a normal agent and a Deltradiology Agent is I appoint an agent in Delhi, Mr. X appoints an agent in Delhi, he says, I manufacture these AC remotes, find buyers for me, and the orders that you book me, I'll give you 10% of it. He gets me buyers. I sell stock worth 1 crore rupees. Now I receive 95 lakh rupees against that sale, but one person to whom I had made a sale of 5 lakh rupees, he runs away. Now, how much have I lost? 5 lakh rupees. I had supplied the goods, but I couldn't recover. I appoint another agent. He says, I can bring you an order for 10 crore rupees. I said, very well. I said, I can pay you 10% commission, but I have had some bad experience in the past. If you can guarantee that this payment will be received, I can pay you 15% commission. And he says, okay, sir. I'll give you orders. I will also ensure your payment. I make sales of 10 crore rupees. 90% of the buyers pay, 10% do not pay. That I charge from the Deltradiology Agent. So basically, an agent who ensures payment to the supplier, that agent is known as Deltradiology Agent. Now, whether Deltradiology Agent would be covered under Schedule 1. What do I mean when I say would be covered under Schedule 1? Schedule 1 meaning only one kind of agent is discussed in Schedule 1. An agent who receives or supplies goods on behalf of the principal. So, whether Deltradiology Agent would be covered under that category? Yes, no. The answer is coverage of Deltradiology Agent under Schedule 1 has to be separately analyzed, and merely being a Deltradiology Agent is no testimony to the fact whether he will be covered under that principal-agent relationship or not. What am I saying? Deltradiology Agent is a separate concept. Of course, this is an agent, but for us to ensure or check or answer whether a particular Deltradiology Agent would be covered under Schedule 1 for receiving supplies from the principal or not, for that we need to separately analyze whether this Deltradiology Agent is undertaking supply of goods on behalf of the principal. So what do we need to see? We need to see the invoicing pattern. Whether he is issuing the invoice in his own name, but actually the supply is being made on behalf of the principal. So there could be two scenarios. There is a Deltradiology Agent. He is undertaking supply of goods on behalf of the principal, and hence he would be covered under Schedule 1. Or there could be cases where there is a Deltradiology Agent who is not undertaking supply of goods on behalf of the principal. He buys the goods from the principals and further sells it, and hence that those kinds of Deltradiology agents would not be covered under Schedule 1. Another question which has come up relating to Deltradiology agent is whether the interest which is charged by the Deltradiology agent, whether that would be covered for the purposes of determining the value of a particular supply. What am I saying? So, what am I saying? I'm saying that let us analyze one scenario where Deltradiology agent is also an agent covered under Schedule 1. That is, he is undertaking supply of goods on behalf of the principal, and he is showcasing that the supply is happening from him, but actually the goods are being supplied by the principal. In such cases, for the buyer, who is the seller? The agent is the seller. And if this agent is also saying that these goods are worth 1 lakh rupees, but since you are going to make payment after 3 months, I will make the payment on your behalf today, and for that I will charge 10,000 rupees as interest. So the total value which will be charged will be 1,10,000 rupees. The consideration against this transaction will become 1,10,000. Second scenario, where the Deltradiology agent is not an agent covered under Schedule 1. In such cases, since agent has no direct relationship with the buyer, he is simply an agent supplying services, the interest will be separately charged from the buyer. The said amount of interest will not be included in the transaction value for the purposes of determining GST. So this may have sounded a bit complicated. What you need to do is, you need to think this through, and you just need to go back and study your course today. Once you do that, you will be able to understand as to what is the law clearly providing. I will just hold myself here for 2 minutes because this is slightly confusing discussion that we have had, or maybe slightly technical. If any one of you has any queries, please come forward. We'll address those queries here itself, and then we will move forward on to the next discussion. So 2 minutes I'm giving to all of you. Please put forward your queries. Okay, so we have some queries. Mansi is asking, sir, all government revenues are exempt from GST? No, Mansi. All government revenues is a very wide term that you've used, okay? There are certain exemptions specific to the government revenues, and that we will discuss later in the exemptions chapter. Parvinder Kumar had mentioned no audio. I believe, Parvinder, there would be some issue with your system, okay? I believe everyone else, so there is no other person mentioning any audio problem. Okay, Ravi. Deepa is asking, Schedule 1, branch transfer with different GST registration will attract GST. So we will pay GST and claim ITC fully in the transferor branch since no consideration is charged and no value addition. Is this how GST handled practically? Absolutely, Deepa Palur. You've understood it correctly. Mansi is asking, the CNF agent example, please explain again. Mansi, CNF agent we had discussed yesterday, today also, last time I'm repeating it. CNF agent, the full form of CNF agent is clearing and forwarding agent. Clearing and forwarding agent has a limited role to play to ensure that the goods, so first, they are a helping hand in increasing the sales. How do they increase the sales? They don't block their working capital. So if I am manufacturing these AC remotes and selling them, typically a C&F agent will say, where are you based? I will say I am based in Delhi. He says, can you supply goods in Chennai, in Mumbai? I would say, how can I supply? It will be very difficult to identify customers, to identify location for storage, to ensure supply. C&F agent says, don't worry, I have a location in Mumbai, I have a location in Chennai. You send your goods, I will sell them, money will come from it, I will keep my commission and pay back to you the balance. I say, very well. So I say, you buy from me. He says, no, I will not buy. Because if I start buying, suppose you are sending me stock worth 10 crore rupees, so I have to block 10 crore rupees first, then my working capital is involved, then storage, then marketing, then clearing. So he says, I assure you, you will get your payment. You send your goods, I will sell them on your behalf, and I will, the payment will be made to you. So it's a win-win situation. He is providing some services. I am getting increased sales. So this is a C&F agent. And typically, since the C&F agent do not involve their working capital, they never buy goods from the principal. They only undertake sales of goods on behalf of the principal. And this is the kind of transaction which is covered under Schedule 1. That is, a supply of goods without a consideration is made liable to GST under Schedule 1. Ravi, your query has not come up clearly. Kindly tell me again whether C. So what is the complete query? Can you please mention? Okay, good. I'm not seeing too many queries. Either it is all clear or all clear. I'm not sure which category of clear are we dealing with here. So either it could be a good sign that we are not seeing many queries, or it could equally be a bad sign that we are not seeing any queries. In intermediate, I used to see heavy amount of queries. So moving ahead, next is tenancy rights. So why am I discussing these specific transactions, dear friends? Because these are specific scenarios. If you go back to your study material, these are specific scenarios for which clarification has been issued under GST, and they have been specifically covered in your course material. tenancy right says tenant acquires tenancy rights against payment of some premium. Okay. So here we are going to talk about the Pagadi system. What is Pagadi system? Friends, you all would have heard of a very famous place in the heart of our national capital. That is by the name of Connaught Place or TP. In Connaught Place, shops. So this is a very, very prime location in central Delhi, very old market, has a lot of history. You can say it's heart of Delhi. And in such a prime location market, do you know what is the rent that the shops, and when I say shops, huge showrooms, double-storied showrooms, 10, 11 feet entrance kind of showrooms. Do you know what is the kind of rent they pay? 1 rupee, 2 rupees, 10 rupees. And I'm talking about some shops, or maybe a majority of shops. Does it sound surprising to you? I'm talking about central location of national capital, and the shops are paying 1 rupee rent, 2 rupee rent, 10 rupees rent. Does it sound absurd to you? How can this happen? When lakhs and lakhs rupees of rent is being paid for some residential property. So Sushant Singh Rajput was paying some odd 4 lakh rupees for his flat per month as rent. There is a reason behind it. What is the reason? The reason is Pagadi system. What used to happen was, or what may still be happening somewhere in the country is, or what is the Pagadi system is. Suppose I own a property. For any reason, I require good amount of funds, but I don't want to sell my property. What I will do is, I will identify someone, charge a handsome amount of money from him, and give that property to him on Pagadi system. Pagadi system meaning that when I say Pagadi system, I am the possession, the ownership of the shop is remaining with me. But the tenancy rights meaning the right to give that particular property on rent and charge rent are being sold or transferred to the tenant. So the landlord may be the owner of the property, but the possession, of course, in possession meaning that who is in physical, who is physically present on the property will move to the tenant. The tenant will pay periodic rent to the landlord, so he will continue to pay some rent. The rent will be very low amount because I would have charged a hefty amount upfront. Thereafter, the tenant has the option that he can resell these tenancy rights, and if he resells these tenancy rights, then he has to share a certain percentage of such resale proceeds with the owner also. So basically, ownership of the property is with me, possession I have given to someone else, I have charged some amount, he will also pay me rent, but rent will be nominal amount. Thereafter, he can resell such tenancy rights, and whatever amount is earned from such resale, certain percentage will come back to me. And this CP example that I am giving to you, Connaught Place, 1 rupee, 2 rupee or 10 rupees of rent is because these shops were given on Pagadi somewhere close to when India became independent. So early 1950s, something that sort. And it is continuing till today. The owner is someone else. The worth of the property is in several crores. But because their forefathers had given it on pagdi, they have to respect and continue with that pagdi system. And by virtue of that pagdi system, they are only entitled to a nominal amount as rent. So the question here was, there is one more thing. Suppose the landlord says that, okay, I want my property back for me, and now I've a handsome amount of money, or I want to sell my property, or I want to take its possession back. Then the landlord needs to pay the prevailing tenancy premium to get the property vacated. So the question was whether such kind of tenancy rights or pagdi system would be covered under GST and liable to tax. The answer is yes, it is covered under supply and liable to tax under GST, and transfer of tenancy rights to a new tenant against consideration in the form of tenancy premium is taxable. Further services provided by outgoing tenant by way of surrendering the tenancy rights against consideration in the form of a portion of tenancy premium is also liable to GST. Is it clear till here? I mean, I know all of you are senior members in the student fraternity, but still if you can keep mentioning some yes or no or some response in the comments section, in the query section, it may be a moral booster for me. So you can keep mentioning yes, no, understood, not understood, so that there is some engagement from your end. And can you please mention till here you are with me, you're not with me, there are any queries, anything they would want to be covered in detail? Some students are asking regular queries, they are keeping it interactive, but the rest of it, I believe, are looking at it as a one-way communication. So can I get to know some more of you? Can I get to hear some more of you, please? Okay, so there are certain queries. Hiba Khan is asking, how can Gambhir issue invoice in his name when he doesn't own goods? So, Hiba, that while legally that's a valid question, but I hope you would appreciate that when the principal is agreeing that okay, and appointing an agent that okay, you can go ahead and sell my goods or purchase goods in my name, then automatically there is a transfer of consent of acting on behalf of the principal. So if you go beyond this tax law, and if you have a bent for law, when you read law of torts, when you read contract law, you would come to know that even the act of appointing a driver for your car and the driver does something unfortunate wherein damages are to be paid, the liability indirectly falls on the principal, that is the owner of the car. And then the owner of the car cannot say that the accident was done by the driver. Why are you making me liable? Remember the Salman Khan case? The driver said I was driving. That was a separate aspect. The criminal liability was being pinned. But when it comes to damages, the liability always falls back on the principal. Okay, so that is something which is legally accepted and understood. Mansi is asking, sir, in case of import of goods, services provided by clearing. So that is a separate aspect, Mansi. I mean, can you detail why are you pressing? What's the intent by asking this query? Deepa Palur is asking this query regarding valuation. Deepa, please, I have seen your query. Please be with us till the valuation chapter, okay? We'll discuss this there, don't worry. Thank you, Anita. Dilip Kumar is asking whether tenancy right transfer is an intangible asset. Tenancy right, not tenancy right transfer, but tenancy right is an intangible asset. Okay? Great. So there are certain people who responded to the call. Thank you. Okay, so let's move back to the discussion. Okay, great to see there are people from all over India. So there's some from Kerala, Faridabad, Kolhapur, Bangalore, Kochi, Mumbai, Chennai, Dehradun, Udaipur. Wonderful. Great that we all could connect over here through this platform. So I would request all of you, please keep the session interactive. It's for your benefit and my benefit also, okay? Now next, another thing which has been clarified is joint venture. Why was there a need to clarify joint venture? Because joint venture has a bit of history to it, and the concept is such that often in a joint venture, the singularity versus the duality concept comes into play. Now, some of you would be thinking, what is singularity versus duality? Let me explain it to you. I am a chartered accountant, I am an indirect tax specialist, or so I claim. I provide advisory services in indirect taxes. So suppose there is Hindustan Unilever and they say that we need an opinion from you. Issue an opinion on this point and we'll pay you certain amount for that. So what does it become? Supply of services by a person in the course of furtherance of business for a consideration and hence liable to tax. One odd day, I issued an opinion from C.A. Shashank Gupta to C.A. Shashank Gupta. I'm giving you a hypothetical example. Some of you would have heard that Hindi dialogue also. ये तोहफा हमने खुद को दिया है. You know, there was a person I used to work for earlier. He was my senior, and he gave me a very good this thing I'm sharing with all of you. He told me that whenever you do something which you want, which you're not unable to do, and that's a task. Basically, it's a task. Like, or even if it's your birthday, then you should go and you should buy a gift for yourself. And if you read a book, I cannot recall that book. So that book actually gives you a tip that if there is something that you're wanting to do and you're not able to gather enough motivation, tie it to something that you want to buy. It could be the latest iPhone, it could be a latest Apple Watch, it could be anything, car, this thing, that thing. Big, small, doesn't matter. And say that if I do it for myself, I will buy this. So that actually is motivation enough for you to get the task done. So coming back to our discussion, joint venture is a similar kind of thing. So what is a joint venture? So I told you, one is I issued an opinion to Hindustan Unilever. Another is I issued an opinion to myself. As soon as I issued an opinion to myself, Immediately the GST department came to me and said, "Sir," I said, "Yes." "You issued an opinion to Hindustan Unilever?" I said, "Yes." "You charged 1 lakh rupees?" I said, "Yes." "You paid GST at the rate of 18%, 18,000? I said, "Yes." "Why don't you pay tax on this opinion also that you've issued to yourself?" And I can take a plea. How can you say that I provided a service to myself? So that is the concept of singularity and duality. In income tax, this is known as no one can derive profit from himself. So we cannot make profit out of ourselves. Okay, so that's the concept of singularity and duality. Now, joint venture. What is joint venture? Joint venture is a group of persons. Persons could be companies, partnership firms, LLPs, individuals. They come together for a specific purpose, specific task. They pool their resources, get the task done, and then go back to their separate ways. So here in joint venture also, the concept of singularity versus duality may come to your mind, that joint venture is not a separate legal entity. This is a group of people doing work for a common goal, common purpose. Can they be made liable if one person from the joint venture is doing some work for the entire joint venture? So these kind of questions were coming, and hence a clarification was given that suppose you are 5 group of friends who form a joint venture, that we have to go to attend a GMCA session. We are going to go by a car. We'll hire a Mercedes. 5 of us will go together to GMCS on a Mercedes, and let us all pool the money to book that Mercedes. So you pool it. One out of your 5 friends has a Mercedes car. And he says, at the time of contribution, he remains silent. Okay, let us contribute. Say suppose 5,000 rupees each, 2,000 rupees, 10,000, whatever. Now a pool of 25,000 rupees is created. 5 friends, 5,000 each, 25,000. You start identifying vendor, from which vendor should be asked to give us this Mercedes car for pick and drop. And he suddenly comes in and says, so a vendor gives you a quote of 30,000 rupees, 50,000 rupees. No vendor is coming within that allocated pool. Now the friend comes up and he says, I can get my Mercedes, my father has recently bought it, but this 25,000 rupees, then you pay to me. Effectively, this would never happen, that the friends would never pay him the money, but hypothetically, let us presume. Now, compare the situations. First situation, where you as a group of friends would have taken the Mercedes-Benz car on lease. Oh, for this transportation, would have you paid GST or not? You would have paid GST. Without doubt, he would have charged GST on his invoice and you would have paid. But now, since a member has that facility and he is taking the money from the joint venture, should here GST not become applicable? GST will be applicable for this transaction also. And that is what this clarification says, that when they are pooling their resources, very well, no GST. But from that pool, if one of the members of the joint venture is undertaking that service or supply and he is being paid from the pool of the joint venture, then that activity is liable to tax as it would be otherwise. Clear? Next is Priority Sector Lending Certificate, or PSLC. What is this Priority Sector Lending Certificate? Recently, so when our Prime Minister Mr. Modi, he came into power in first term, one of his major highlights of his tenure was banking for all. So there was a drive taken nationwide to open bank accounts for all the people who were not yet a part of the banking system. So reaching out to rural areas, reaching out to farmers, reaching out to people living below the poverty line, and getting them to open their bank account. A question was raised. Why is this important? Why do you want these people to open bank accounts? Where is the money for them to keep so that they should open their bank accounts? And the answer to it was, once these bank accounts were opened, they were used for direct transfer of money to the end person. If the government in the lockdown said that we are going to give 1,000 rupees to every family as support, the amount was directly credited into their bank account, no middleman. I'm not marketing Modi government. There could be people who are happy, there could be people who are against. I'm not wanting to, in any manner, give it any political color. That is not my intent. I'm just coming to the concept. I'm setting the basis for that. Secondly, a mandate was given. The mandate used to be earlier also, but a further pressing mandate was given that these people, small farmers, small petty workers, they should be given loans at easy conditions, without security, at a lower rate of interest. Because these people, since they are not a part of banking system, they have to go to private lenders, and who then extort or they subject them to harsh conditions, which are often family breaking, which often break their back. A small person borrowing money from private person at 24%, 30%, 40%, what can he do? From the bank, the same person can get the same amount for 9-10%. So, specific focus like defense, government wants to develop defense, like innovation, like IT. So these are priority sectors. Women coming into entrepreneurship. So a target is set at the central level, which is given to all the banks, financial institutions, that see, your business is to lend money to people. You will lend to certain people, so corporates, big oncos, those all are very close to you. You will pay to them. There is no doubt they will get it done to either hook or crook. But we want you to at least do lending this much percentage of your total lending to the sector of give loans to individual women, give to ex-army men, give to farmers, give to students, give to this and this and this. अब क्या होता है? आप में से कुछ बच्चे तो, some of you students would be going back home and studying the chapter every day. Your queries will get resolved in time. Some of you would say, "Arey, he's saying only, na? I will study later and I will show how to clear the exams." Okay. And later when that person studies, he gets some query. Who will he approach? The person who studied every day. So he will extract the knowledge out from it. So it's a balancing act, right? Similarly, certain banks achieve this target of priority sector lending. Some banks underachieve, some banks overachieve. Now the banks who overachieve, they have been given a right to sell their overachievement to someone who has underachieved. Why this has been done? So that once the target is complete, the motivation for the banks to continue lending to priority sectors is continued. That is, even if you exceed your target, you can sell this excess lending to the banks who would have underperformed. And this exercise is known as priority sector lending certificate. So one bank did excess lending, they could sell this to underbank could complete their targets, the benefit for them. Excess bank could sell this and hence a benefit to them. Question arose whether this lending activity is liable to GST. If yes, whether this is securities, whether this is services, whether this is goods. Clarified, this is goods and not securities. This is liable to tax under GST, and when liable to tax under GST, the recipient who will be paying this GST can avail the input tax credit of such GST. So this, friends, now we have completed some specific clarifications which were issued and which are a part of your course. We are now moving ahead to discuss certain additions which were made to Schedule 3. And what is Schedule 3? Schedule 3 is those transactions which are neither supply of goods nor supply of services, or you can say negative list of GST. What all is covered under Schedule 3? What all did we discuss today? Negative list of GST. Yesterday we had discussed it includes functions performed by MP, MLAs, ministers, funeral, burial or cremation, sale of completed land and building, and so on and so forth. 3 more additions were made to Schedule 3 which are a part of your course. First is merchant trading. What is merchant trading? I am sitting in India, in Delhi. I buy some goods from London, UK, and sell those goods in New York, United States. So the goods sitting here only, I have not gone anywhere. Neither the goods have come here, okay? And you can imagine also geographically. So London, UK is in west, and thereafter New York, United States is further west. So I buy the goods from Mr. X in London. Goods are cleared from United Kingdom. The goods are shipped to United States, New York. Goods enter United States, are cleared in United States and reach the customer, Mr. Y. I pay to Mr. X in foreign exchange and I receive my proceeds from Mr. Y in foreign exchange. Question arose whether such supplies could be made liable to tax under GST in India. So here the law has now clarified that since neither the supply was initiated in India, nor the supply is completed in India, the entire transaction has taken place outside India, and this is generally known as merchant trading. And because none of the the goods are never in the Indian territory, hence this transaction is not liable to tax under GST, and that is why this transaction has been specifically covered under Schedule 3. Next addition has been sale of warehouse goods. What is sale of warehouse goods? MNCs, suppose there is a company, Avery Dennison, which is a United States based company, and they have a USP in developing certain kinds of adhesives which you use in a sticker. So when you use a sticker, you can separate the sticker from the back and you can paste it at some place. It can get detached also and it can get pasted also. So 3M, Avery Dennison, so these kinds of companies specialize in certain kinds of adhesives, tapes. Okay. Specialized meaning that they have an international distinction in only dealing with these kinds of goods. So nobody else has been able to make these kinds of goods. So what they do is, they are now supplying across the globe. Across the globe, what do they do? Now, supplying across the globe, when any goods has to come into India, we all know that at the time of customs clearance, the applicable custom duty has to be paid. Suppose this 3M company or Avery Dennison sells goods worth 100 crores, in fact it's much more, it's 1000, 2000 crores in a year, and all this is manufactured in US, sold to India and sold across the globe. Now 1000 crore worth of stock, and when it is cleared from custom, it is liable to custom duty at the rate of 30%. Means 300 crores worth of custom duty is then to be paid. So what is the total value? The total value rises to 1300 crores. Would a rational person want to invest this kind of money? And hence the concept of custom bonded warehouse has come up, wherein goods are brought to India, goods are deboarded at the port in India, goods are stored in a warehouse under customs jurisdiction. That is, they are not cleared from customs, but they are stored in the customs warehouse, storage charge is paid, and the benefit is goods are directly sold from this customs warehouse to the customer. What is the benefit? The benefit is 30% of tax which would have otherwise been involved from the pocket of the seller is saved. Okay? And the person who is the buyer gets these goods cleared from the customs, pays the applicable customs duty, avails the credit of GST portion of customs duty, and thereafter undertakes his activity. So, sale of warehouse goods customs means goods which are present in the customs bonded area in a customs warehouse, when they are sold, so any goods unless they become a part of the domestic tariff area meaning they cross the customs border, they can only be made liable to one tax, that is customs duty. So, sale of warehouse goods by 3M or Avery Dennison to their customer in India would not be liable to tax as it has been covered under Schedule 3, but does that mean that the government loses any revenue? No. Why? Because when the buyer will clear these goods from the customs warehouse, he will pay the applicable customs duty, and hence the entire revenue proceeds will be collected by the government. Next is high C sales. High C sales, what does high C sale mean? I bought latest MacBook which was just launched in US. I bought 100 of them and I asked them to ship them to India. So they were packed, they were stored on a ship, cleared customs in the US, and as the ship was in the Pacific Ocean, out of US, out of India, it was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. 99 of you students approached me and asked me, "Sir, we have heard you've bought latest MacBook at very good prices from US." I said, "Yes." Sir, do one thing, sell those to us. But I said, I don't have them with me. They are still coming on their way, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. You said, "Sir, don't worry, we will get it cleared. You just sell those to us. And once you sell it to us, on behalf of those documents, we'll go to the customs bonded area and get it cleared." So I sold those goods to you. Will this transaction be liable to GST? Clarified, this transaction will not be liable to GST and covered under Schedule 3. Why? Same principle. Goods are outside India. They have not yet come into the domestic tariff area. Once they reach the customs station in India, thereafter they will be cleared. And when they will be cleared, then is where the applicable tax will be paid at the time of customs clearance. And hence, prior to that, any transaction being done for those goods is not liable to tax. So friends, these are the recent 3 additions in Schedule 3. I would request if any one of you has any queries, please put in the box. And here we'll take a break for 10-15 minutes today. I'm slightly not feeling well. So we'll take a break of 10-15 minutes. We'll cover the session today. I'll just go quickly have some tea, coffee. And we'll meet, so it's 7:21 in my clock. We'll meet at 7:35, okay? A slightly longer break today. In the meantime, please go through all this discussion and please populate your queries. I'll come back at 7:35. Just so, hello and welcome back to the session. Let us quickly see what are queries that you've put in. Mansi. Ravi, which rate are you talking about? Present rate in private sector 60%. Sorry, can you detail which rate are you talking about? Krishna is asking, if I buy goods from country X and goods come to India and after that sold to country Y, then GST would be applicable? Krishna, the answer is yes, but there is something more to your query. When I buy goods from any country, say X, and when the goods come to India, they would actually be liable to custom duty. So custom duty would generally involve basic custom duty plus integrated goods and services tax. That is IGST. Okay. Thereafter, when I clear the goods from India, on exports, there could be two situations. I could undertake exports on payment of tax, that is GST, and then claim a refund for that. Or I could undertake exports of goods without payment of GST, that is under bond or letter of undertaking. So, I would request you to that we rest this discussion here, and we'll take this up later, okay, in IGST chapter. Ambika is asking, in case of joint venture, GST is applicable even in own share of member? Yes, Ambika, doesn't matter. And just you can correlate with the example that when 5 friends took Mercedes and the company says that I will charge 50,000 plus GST, so in that 50,000 everyone's share would be liable to GST. How can there be an exception where one person is providing it, so the entire amount will be liable to GST, even one person's own, because then the transaction is happening between JV and that particular person and not the person to himself. Okay. Neha is asking, please explain interest liability under DCA. Okay. So, let me give you an example. Suppose there was a sale of 10 lakh rupees and the buyer said, I will make payment after 3 months. So the Deltradiology Agent comes in and says, but the seller is demanding the payment on the first day. And this generally happens in the cement business. It's very common in the cement business, because in cement business, no batch is cleared unless first the payment is received and only then cement is cleared. So there it's a very big, Deltradiology agents are very active there. So the buyer says, I can only make payment after 3 months. But the seller says, I want the payment today. And hence, Deltradiology Agent steps in and makes the payment of 10 lakh rupees. But he then charges 10,000 rupees as interest from the buyer. Now, there could be two cases. One case is where the Deltradiology Agent is an agent covered under Schedule 1. If covered under Schedule 1, that means that the agent himself is the seller, and in that case, the consideration will become 10 lakh and 10,000. Second case, Deltradiology Agent is not covered under Schedule 1, simply an agent, not the seller. In that case, 10,000 rupees is received as interest, and the consideration will remain 10 lakh rupees only. Okay? Moving back to our discussion. Some more specific clarifications with respect to the composite supply and mixed supply. For composite supply, circular number 11/2017 was issued, wherein it was mentioned that when you procure printing services, printing as in you want to get a book, you've written up, suppose tomorrow you write a book on GST, and you approach a printing press, you give them the content that you print this book in this format, this many pages, this kind of cover. They print that. So when printing, they would actually be using their own paper, ink. Both of these are goods. They would also be providing printing services. So it's a combination of supplies. But what is the principal supply here? It's the printing service. And hence, this transaction will be treated as supply of service. However, suppose I run a firm and that firm gets branded envelopes later. So basically we say that, okay, we have these, we want branded envelopes, letters, boxes, tissues, etc. That you would have seen in restaurants and everything. So there, while branding is happening, but actually if you see, how will the order be placed? The order will say that I want 10,000 tissues and all these tissues should be branded with my name. So that is the principal supply there is the supply of goods, and hence this will be treated as supply of goods. Next is activity of bodybuilding. So bodybuilding, not that bodybuilding going to the gym, but bodybuilding of a bus. So here they've given a very interesting clarification: to be determined on basis of facts and circumstances. So facts and circumstances meaning, so if someone has only taken services and the material for building has been supplied by him, it will be a service transaction. Or the material and services are both supplied by the same person, but he's billed separately for material, separately for services, individual supplies. Thereafter, third category could be that it's a composite supply involving goods and services, and where supply of goods has the primary nature, then the supply of goods will become the composite supply. So that is what they're trying to say, that it will be determined basis facts and circumstances. Next is supply of retreated tires. Retreated tires meaning, so retreated tires, if you want to understand what is best, because I will try to explain, but the best way is just go back and Google it and see the videos, so you will know what is retreating of tires. Okay, so retreating of tires, the entire activity is actually supply of service, but supply of retreated tires, old tires, is supply of goods. Okay, here is where now you would be taking up the lead of the session. I want answers from you. Now the question here is, basis our analysis of Schedule 2 that we had studied yesterday, you need to tell me that there are these 5 activities: renting of immovable property, transfer of right in goods without transfer of title, works contract service, temporary transfer of permitting use or enjoyment of IPR, and transfer of title and goods under an agreement which stipulates that property shall pass at a future date. So you need to tell me which of this is supply of services and which of this is supply of goods. For the sake of reference, you can take it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So mention 1, service 2, service 3, this, that. Now I am waiting. You have to answer. I'll see who will answer correct, incorrect, and please don't be afraid of answering wrong. Don't be afraid, don't be under pressure that I have to answer right. This is where it is your right to be wrong. Okay? So if you're wrong, it's absolutely no matter. But if you don't attempt or you don't participate, then that is wrong. The final stage where you cannot be wrong will be your examination when you're writing your answers. Okay? This is the first step. Please participate in maximum number, right, wrong. Give it your earnest attempt. Now I'm waiting for all of you to answer. I'll give all of you 5 minutes to please populate your answers. And I'll not be moving ahead the session until and unless I see at least 10 responses. Okay, so let me see how many answers are there. Sorry, I'll keep this. Kanika is asking, shall we write CN as 1117 or not? So, I believe you're asking about circular number. So, circular number and section number and subsection number, clause number. See, if you can recall it correctly and you're absolutely sure, then there is nothing like it. But if you're not sure, then don't take a chance, because if your fundamentals are correct, if your answering is correct, if your concepts are clear, that in itself is sufficient. Don't waste that effort by mentioning, simply guessing any random section number or subclause number. Okay? Personally, when I gave my answers, I made it intentionally, I made it a practice for myself, okay, that I never used to mention section number or something until unless I was 120% sure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So I have 8 answers. If 2 more people answer, we will move ahead of this query. So 2 more people. Two more people. Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. So a lot of students have now come forward and answered. Most of you are correct. Some of you have erred. Let us take this one by one. Renting of immovable property. When I say renting of immovable property, I believe almost all of you are correct. This is supply of service. Second is transfer of right in goods without transfer of title in goods. So right in goods, I gave you an example of car being taken, right? So what did we discuss? What is that? That is a case of supply of service and not goods. Next is works contract, and here itself it is mentioned services. So nothing more to be said. Temporary transfer of permitting use or enjoyment of any intellectual property right. In itself, again, it is a case of supply of service. And the last, transfer of title in goods under an agreement which stipulates that property shall pass at a future date. So, this we had discussed. I had given you an example of Fevicol, right? An alternative of Fevicol, which is kept at the counter, and the seller says that please try to sell it. If you can sell, we can share the proceeds. Otherwise, I'll take back the stock. So this we had discussed. It is covered under supply of goods. Those of you who answered correctly, wonderful. Those of you who could not answer correctly, no need to worry, because now you know that you need to check where were you going wrong, and because you could go wrong today, you can correct yourself for tomorrow and prepare better for your exams. Imagine, you did not attempt this question and you thought, oh, okay, I would have answered correctly, and the same confusion you would have faced in writing your answers in the exam. Okay. Another question for you, and those of you who answer it correctly within the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'll mention your name, and I'll specially mention your name with my personal applause. I mean, I would really appreciate if you can read this patiently, analyze it, and answer it accordingly. So the question is relating to import of service. There is a case study on that. Out of this case study, 4 statements have been mentioned, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have to answer which statements are correct. There could be one statement which is correct, there could be no statements which are correct, there could be multiple statements which are correct. So, I'm giving you good 10 minutes, read it carefully and answer in the comment section. The one who answers correctly gets a special mention, and I will also mention special mention to who answers correctly, and I will mention the names of all the people who answer, irrespective correct or incorrect. Come on. 10 minutes. I'll give more than 10 minutes. Take your time. It's 7:55 in my clock. 8:05 I am waiting till 8:05. Answer. With 5 more minutes. I hope all of you would be reading the questions carefully and will answer accordingly. Okay, so there's no hurry. That there is a reason I've given you 10 minutes and I'm cautioning you again. And one more tip that I can share with all of you for your exams is, it's not going to matter how soon you answer. What is going to matter is how correctly you answer. And let me add another caution point. Whenever you read a question and you immediately start thinking, okay, it's very easy, stop your mind there, getting into a trap. Because for the question where you think it's so easy, it must be a trick question. Because let me tell you, in CF final exams, there is nothing easy. Okay? I am not saying that everything is very difficult, this and that, but nothing is very easy. And if you see, you get 3 hours for 100 marks, right? So it's basically 180 minutes. So for 1 mark, you can maximum allocate 1.8 minutes. So if it's a 10 mark question, you can give it 18 minutes. Allocate good amount of time to reading the question and reading it carefully. Two more minutes. One more minute. All right. Let me tell who all have answered. First, I'm taking names of people who have answered. Ambika, Darshana, Nitish, Ravi, Pratima, Vijay, Sneha, Amandeep, Kunal, Hiba, Rahul, Nitish, Vaishnavi, Kanika, John, Manali, Rahila, Mahendra, Rakesh, Tani, and Preeti. Now, okay, so after Preeti, we have Gaurav and we have V. Shanmugam. Before I go on to tell who has answered correctly, let us see what the question says and what is it wanting out of us. So it says, Mr. Mandeep, a registered dealer, is doing material business in the state of Assam. He availed architect services for his business from his friend in London free of cost. He also availed designing services from his brother in London for 5 lakh for his personal purposes. In respect of services imported by Mr. Mandeep, which of the following is a correct statement? First statement, architect services for his business from his friend in London free of cost is considered as a supply. What have we studied regarding import of service without consideration? Import of service when in the course or furtherance of business from a related person, even if without consideration, will be treated as supply. Is friend considered a related person? and hence first statement is incorrect. Second statement, designing services from his brother in London for 5 lakh for his personal purposes is considered as a supply. What have we studied regarding personal use of import of service? Import of service for a consideration even when not in course of furtherance of business will be treated as supply. So here there is import of service, yes. For a consideration, yes. For personal purpose, does not matter, because even if otherwise business purpose, it will be treated as supply. And hence, second statement is correct statement. Third, architect services for his business from his friend in London free of cost is not considered as a supply. This we have already discussed. Since in one we held it as incorrect, hence third statement becomes correct. And fourth, since second is correct, fourth becomes incorrect. So second and third statement are correct, and that is the right answer. Let us see and specially mention who all have answered this correctly. Amandeep, special mention to Amandeep. Rahul Sharma, special mention to Rahul Sharma. Mahendra. So 3 people have answered it correctly. Rest, please go back and study. So this should be an eye-opener for you. This is what we discussed yesterday and today. Out of around 25 people have answered. Okay. And out of 25, only 3 are correct. I don't think there can be a bigger eye-opener than this. That is all that I can say. So I am pausing the share, stopping. We have completed our PPT. And now we are going to discuss the amendments, and post that I will close the class today. I'm not feeling well. Okay. I have a headache since evening. And I think we will well complete our both chapters. So we'll concluding our course early today. Okay. I'm sorry, I really wanted that I could carry on the class till late, but my health is not permitting, and I have already stretched it beyond what I can manage. So first is services by way of grant of alcoholic liquor license is neither a supply of goods nor a supply of service. So here the question was, since we already know that alcoholic liquor has been constitutionally kept out the purview of GST, and alcoholic liquor, as we all know, is a state subject which is very strictly regulated, and no one can sell liquor unless they get a specific license from the state government. The question was that for obtaining this license to sell liquor, certain amount is to be paid. That is known as license fee. And is this license fee liable to GST? The answer was no, this license fee is not liable to GST and hence covered under Schedule 3, that is, it is neither supply of goods nor supply of service. Second clarification was, goods are taken outside India for exhibition purposes. When taken outside India for exhibition purposes, meaning there is no consideration for goods, they are simply taken outside India. The question was whether taking goods outside India for exhibition will qualify the goods as export and hence such supplies would become eligible for export benefit, that is refund, or will they be considered as zero rated supply? A question may come up, what is zero rated supply? That we will discuss, don't worry. So it has been clarified that when for any supply to become zero rated supply, first it has to be supply, and the supply section clearly says that there has to be a consideration for a transaction to become supply. When goods are moved outside India for exhibition, there is no consideration, hence no supply, and if no supply, they cannot become zero rated supply. Go back and read it. If you find any further questions, I'll take it up in the next class. Next is levy of GST on the service of display of name or placing of nameplates of the donor in the premises of charitable organizations receiving donation or gifts from individual donors. You would have gone to temples, mosque, church. On the fan it is written donated by this and this. On the wall it is written room was constructed by this. In the temple it is written this was constructed by this. So a question came, can this donation be made chargeable to GST because some marketing is happening, right? When you go, you get to read the name that Mr. X has donated, Mr. Y has donated. So it was clarified that all these donations are personal in nature and hence no business objective, not liable to GST. However, if it is in the nature of marketing, of business or anything, then a question of applicability of GST may arise. Otherwise, it doesn't arise. Okay. So these are the 3 amendments relevant for this particular chapter. With this, friends, we have effectively completed entire discussion for chapter 1 and chapter 2, including amendments, including practical questions. I would request all of you to go back and study once more, since you could see so many of you have answered incorrectly. Don't be demotivated, okay? All that you need to do is study carefully. Many of those 25 would even know the answer, but just in hurry of reading, hurry of answering may have missed it out. So go back and analyze what went wrong, study today itself, and then let us please meet in the next lecture. I'm concluding my today's class, and let us please meet in the next lecture, okay? Thank you.